Right, good afternoon. May I say it's a privilege talking about the feminine in a room full of men. Well, thank you for being here. So we've explored 5 parts to the series already on delving into the feminine. So we began with speaking about how both the archetypes, the masculine and the feminine energies, the psychic archetypes, reside in all of us regardless of our chosen gender. And then we spoke about what is the current conversation around the feminine. We've been hearing about it in the media in many ways in terms of the spiritual aspect of the feminine rising, the legal piece that's happening in various countries around the world, that there is a social aspect of more women coming into the workforce and all of that. So that conversation is happening at various levels. So my approach to this series has been largely around the psychological aspect of how do we as individuals acknowledge and work more actively with the feminine, given that traditionally in the kind of a society that we are raised in, we are taught more to appreciate the masculine parts of ourselves. So, and when I say masculine parts, not necessarily only in men, but also the masculine in women has been more appreciated and encouraged than the feminine has been. At a very simple social level, this translates as typical conditioning sentences that we all hear saying boys don't cry or girls don't do certain things and all of that. So we've all grown up with a belief that we've imbibed from outside of ourselves. It's not really an intrinsic thing, but something that we've imbibed from outside of ourselves, saying boys are boys and therefore they do certain things, girls are girls and therefore they do different things, and they shouldn't mix. And if you mix, there's disturbance in the society, and that's not really taken very well. So along the way, we also spoke about how while gender is assumed to be a matter of birth and accidental biology, gender eventually is a matter of choice. The biological sex, yes, we cannot really do too much about unless you're willing to really go through a sex change operation for whatever reason. And that's not really necessary in most cases. But gender, in terms of being able to embrace the masculine and feminine aspects of ourselves, is a possibility that all of us need to consciously explore. And my take on that would be that as a society, we've really explored very little on gender. We've explored the extremes. We've explored masculine and feminine, right? So you are either masculine in behavior or feminine in behavior, but there is an entire spectrum in between that lies unexplored. For most parts of the world. There are parts of the world that do acknowledge the gender spectrum completely. I think one of the things that I had spoken about when we delved into the gender spectrum was about societies in the world that actually acknowledge more than 2 genders. Right? So that there are a lot of huge communities. There's this community in the Bugis community in Indonesia, for example, and it's a huge one, about 5-6 million people, so it's not a small tribe, where they actually classify people into 5 genders and not 2. So it's not just boy or girl, but it's about boy, girl, in between, female, male, male, female. There is all sorts of classification. If we have to look at it from the religious perspective as well, Buddhism in fact acknowledges the 3rd gender as a very clear classification. And by 3rd gender, they don't necessarily mean the hermaphrodite or the hijra gender, but they talk of people who have a natural preference for bringing in both energies. There's, I think, a term for it, pandaka, if I'm not wrong. That's the Buddhist term for the mixed, the balanced gender. We eventually spoke about how the anima,
they say kinnar. I think
kinnar, yeah. Kinnar in Indian mythology is usually equated to hermaphrodite.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, we spoke about anima development. Anima development is something that Carl Jung spoke about from the psychological angle in terms of how does the feminine grow in a man. given that the larger conditioning is masculine, how does the feminine still continue to grow in the man? And there were stages that we spoke about. And in the last piece, we spoke about how do we start working with both, given that we've had a background into the feminine. How do we start actively working with both the masculine and the feminine? With the masculine typically energizing things that we do, the actions that we have in the world, and the feminine energizes our being, how we are as individuals and therefore as a society and as a planet. How do we start mingling with both very actively? And we spoke about how do we use our body and our emotions and our language as a tool to be able to align the doing and the being. So today we're speaking about presence. Sounds very simple, and in fact is very simple, and yet because we are trained against presence, to be able to get back to it becomes a challenge. Right? So conceptually there's very little to it, but in practice we need to sometimes do a lot to be able to overcome the lack of presence, to be able to simply come into a state of presence. It's treated as the state of presence is treated as a key to the feminine, key to accessing the feminine energy within us, regardless of whether we are a man or a woman, because it's the masculine energy that has created the linearity of timeline. Right? So the idea of the past and the present and the future and is created in the patriarchal world. The feminine only understands the here and now, because the feminine idea of time, so to say, is cyclical. It doesn't understand linear, and therefore for the feminine energy in us, presence is the key to be able to function. And therefore any time that we are in a situation and we're not completely there, and when I say completely, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all there in that one moment in space, the feminine cannot get completely accessed. Okay? As simple as saying, in this moment here, all of us are in this room physically and completely physically. We've not left an arm or a leg behind. However, mentally, we might be in different spaces. Possibly a lot of us are thinking about traffic on the way back home, or work, or our families, or different things in the world. Emotionally, we are all in different spaces, and those emotions may not necessarily corroborate with what's happening here. So some of us might carry anger, or sadness, or happiness, or joy, or ecstasy, with not all of which belong here, right? That they're coming in from elsewhere, right? And when that happens, we're not completely here and now, and as a result, the feminine energy, the psychic energy of the feminine in us doesn't completely open up for access. It's partially there, but it's not completely there. And what does it mean for it to not be there is that if you're functioning largely with the masculine, we are functioning with the existing system or modality or mechanism, as we would call it. It's very mundane. There's no response. It's very reactive. The feminine brings in the creativity. It brings in new ideas. It brings in things that have not been thought about before or experienced before. And that often does not get permitted when the masculine is dominant. Because one very important value of the masculine in all of us is safety and control, and therefore we like to maintain status quo. Whereas the feminine doesn't understand status quo, because it only knows here and now, so there's no long-term aspect of the feminine. It only thinks of everything as being here and now. So therefore, accessing the feminine is accessing through presence, largely. And while presence is a very natural state of being when we are born, it is something that we learn to outgrow. We are taught to outgrow through our school system, through our families, through our workspaces. So it is something that we need to reclaim in many ways. So what is presence? Well, there are many definitions, so to say, of presence. I like this particular one, which is from a book called Shakti Leadership, written by dear friend Nilima. Presence is simply a state of conscious flow with whatever is it that you're experiencing now. Right? So whatever is it that you're experiencing in a sensory manner now, in this moment, you're seeing each other, you're hearing whatever's happening in this room, that there's a physical sensation of the temperature of the air conditioner and all of that. So the completeness of the experience in this moment is the presence. It is about being in constant and conscious contact with one's higher self. And the contact with that higher self, you might call it soul or God or whatever is it that you like to call it, it happens on its own. It's not something that you aspire for through presence, but because you're in a state of presence, it flows. Right? It's not, it's more a byproduct and not so much as the goal of presence. So why would we want to aspire to presence? Apart from, of course, accessing the feminine aspect of our energy and therefore having more energy to function with on a day-to-day basis. And being able to access the feminine in equal measure as the masculine makes a lot of difference to how creative we can be in the world, how much can we contribute to the world at work, in our families, in our communities, and in every space that we are in. The gifts of the presence are that it brings in wholeness, because we're accessing the masculine and we're accessing the feminine together. So we're not functioning with 50% of our energy the way we are normally trained to do. Right? So the first gift that it brings in is the sense of wholeness. It also brings in the aspect of flexibility, because with wholeness comes a choice to be masculine or feminine or both, and the ability to flex between whatever energy spaces that you want to be in, which means if you want to be creative in this moment, you be creative, and the next moment you feel you need to destroy something, go be destructive, or simply maintain them. All of those choices become available, and because choices are available, there's also the flexibility to be able to move amongst those choices. And thirdly, and very importantly, is the aspect of congruence. Congruence in terms of being and doing. Alignment, right? So what I think and what I feel and what I need and what I say and what I do completely are in integrity with each other, which is huge in many ways, because that aspect of congruence very often is killed by our conditioning. Right? We are taught, for example, to be polite in the name of etiquette or diplomatic, when we probably think or feel something else, and we end up saying and doing something else. And in that process, we're no longer true to ourselves. We're no longer in integrity. So it doesn't mean that if you're accessing the feminine or if you're accessing presence, we stop being diplomatic or we stop being nice to others. But because the truth comes out in a manner that is not violent, it is simply coming from a space of our need and respect of the other's presence, it is simply taken as sharing, it is taken as observation, and there is no offense in the process. So congruence is, in a way, brutal truth, brutal honesty, but brutal honesty that lands well. Because it's coming from a very benign space of compassion, saying, here's where I am, here's what I feel about you, here's what I think about what you're doing. And yet, it's just my experience. It's not a judgment against who you are or what you're doing or what you're saying. It's just a matter of sharing experience. And because the language is that of sharing and not complaining, not judging, not blaming, it lands.
Is awareness part of wholeness? Because in presence, awareness also will be.
Yeah, presence, awareness in a way leads to presence, and it's also an aspect of presence. Yeah. The wholeness is more about that integration of the two energies.
Big picture.
Yes. Of making both the energies available to us. So it's like the last time we spoke about how the body is the vehicle of the feminine in many ways, and our language is the vehicle of the masculine in many ways, right? So the wholeness is about being completely aware of both at any given point in time. So to be completely aware of what's happening to every pore of my body at any given point in time, and what is my mind saying about it? What is the inner language about what is happening? To be in complete awareness of it will bring about the wholeness and the presence. And the emotions reflect the state of that union between the masculine and the feminine. So if at any point we're feeling off emotionally, which means we're not feeling great, we're feeling either sad or depressed or angry or jealous or guilty or any of those, it indicates a state of imbalance. There's something not getting accessed completely. Either the body is not okay or the mind is not okay, and that needs to get addressed and spoken to in some manner. So, big question, how do we cultivate presence? Reclaim presence. I'm sure all of us do it in our own ways, through meditation, through walks, through music, painting, whatever is it that we do where we are completely there in that moment and not thinking about tomorrow, yesterday, or the world. But presence, in general, it needs to begin with the body. The physical aspect of it is extremely critical, right? And you cannot ignore the body if you're attempting to seek the feminine, because the feminine resides and speaks through the body. It has a very visceral, it is a visceral experience in some ways. So the first step is a relaxed body. So when we say relaxed, it doesn't necessarily mean sitting with eyes closed and cross-legged. It could be relaxation in terms of making sure nothing is in discomfort, right? So it could even be something that happens while you're crossing the road. So it's not conditional as far as the environment is concerned. You don't need a quiet room, you don't need silence. The relaxed body could happen anywhere, so long as you're in awareness and you're able to ease out and open up the body. And with the relaxed body, of course, comes the evenness of the breath. It's not shallow, it's not too deep, it's not too fast or slow. The clarity of the mind comes in when there's no yesterday and there's no tomorrow, it's just here and now. Then that clarity automatically comes, because in here and now, there's just whatever there is in this moment, and therefore there is no trouble. There's just this moment. And with the clear mind, there is an open heart, in the sense that the heart becomes safe, heart feels safe enough to open up to experiences. And overall, the impact of staying in presence is cultivating a sensitive sonar, right? Cultivating sensitivity of our sensory
What's the meaning of
being.
sonar?
Like how you bats, for example, have a very high sonar from the auditory perspective, right? They hear.
The vibration.
Yeah, so they hear frequencies and they respond very quickly, and they hear in a manner that we cannot, right? Now in our case, the sonar is all over. So we have the auditory ability, we have visual ability, we have touch, feel, all of that, we have all the five senses and also the sixth, so to say, in terms of our intuition. But how sensitive is it in terms of how much do we really listen and really see and really feel and touch is a question. So the sensitivity of the sonar is about really opening up all the senses. And a lot of times we've learned not to utilize our senses. Very often I realize this if I'm traveling to, let's say, a rural or a very green countryside kind of an area, and you speak to locals there and you realize they seem to smell so much more than you seem to smell. They identify that, okay, there's going to be rain in 2 hours because there's a certain kind of a smell, and I, for one, cannot make out what that smell is about. I've perhaps never trained my nose to pick up those scents. Right? Or a lot of, if you look at forest rangers, for example, a lot of them will know where a tiger is moving or where a certain animal is calling, which you and I perhaps cannot really pick up because the sonar is not as developed. Right? So the gift of staying in presence is that enhancement of the sonar. You're completely opening up to a lot more experiences than we usually would open up to. So I'd like us to experience this in a really quick manner. I'd like take you through a quick guided process. Okay, not sure if I should call it meditation or not, but let's just take it as a process. So relax in whatever manner that suits you. Ideally with both feet on the ground because that's a lovely grounding energy, and the back relaxed. And if you wish, you can close your eyes as well. And let's begin with relaxing the body completely. So let's begin with our feet. Bring your awareness to your feet, your toes, the soles of your feet, ankles, calves, knees, and completely clench all of these muscles, knees down to the tip of your toes. Completely clench those muscles just for a moment and release. And bring your awareness further up towards your thighs, your buttocks, your pelvic region, and completely clench all of these muscles. Feel it being completely squeezed and release. And as we continue to become aware of our body and to relax it, there might be moments where you're aware of discomfort in a certain part of the body. We're not attempting to change any of that. Simply stay in awareness of the discomfort and let it be. Bring your awareness now to your abdominal region, to the entire front of the abdomen and the back, the lower back, the mid back. Bring it up further, up to your chest, to the upper back. Clench all the muscles, all the organs in the trunk of your body. And release. Bring your awareness further up to your neck, the back of the neck, the shoulder blades, your throat, further down to your upper arms, forearms, fingers, your palm. Squeeze all the muscles in this entire region from the neck to the tip of your finger and release. Let's move our awareness further up from the throat to our jaws, our mouth, cheeks, the ears, eyes, nose, the forehead, the entire back of the head and the brain inside it. Squeeze the complete face and the skull and release. And in this state of relaxation, bring into your awareness the fact that I am here now. My entire body is here now. The only reality of this moment for my being is that I am here now. And because the reality is only and only this moment, I know that in this moment I have nothing to defend. I have nothing to defend. All I have is to be in this moment. And as you extend the state of your presence to your heart, you also know that in this moment I have nothing to promote. The only reality of this moment is that I am completely here with my body, with my emotions, with my spirit, and there is nothing to promote. And as you deepen your awareness in this moment, down to your gut, down to the very core of your being, down to your navel, you also know that in this moment I have nothing to fear. I am complete in this moment with access to my body, my mind, my emotions, and my spirit. And I have nothing to defend. I have nothing to promote. And I have nothing to fear. And in this state of presence where there's no other agenda but to be here and now, this is experiencing presence. And it is as simple as experiencing it through your body and knowing deep within you that in any given moment there's nothing to defend, nothing to promote, nothing to fear. As simple as this is, it is a very powerful state of presence. And I'd invite you, whenever you're ready, to extend this state of presence through the rest of your day. Even as you come back into awareness of this room, and even as you open your eyes, you know that the state of presence is something you can invoke anytime that you choose to. Even as you come back to the room, the presence is very simple to invoke, so long as you can stay in moment to moment awareness of the fact that there's nothing to defend, nothing to promote, nothing to fear.
Because we are always depending or judging.
It's simply a matter of habit that we've cultivated over the years. And just as we have cultivated that habit, we can also cultivate presence as a habit. I mean, come to think of it, it doesn't even make sense to stay in defense all the time, because for all you know, for most moments of our lives, we are in states like these. There are people, there's work, there's whatever that needs to be done. There is nothing to defend. It's just what it is, and there needs to be a response. Yes.
When you want nothing, you have everything.
Yeah.
That is.
Yes. Yeah. So, presence is simple. It's just that because we have trained ourselves against it, we need to train ourselves back into it. And it's not a difficult training at all. It took probably 2-3 minutes here. And it's something that you can do instantaneously if you're able to get into that state with just a little bit of practice. Okay. All we need to remind ourselves is to completely connect with the body, not trying to change any of it. So it's all right if I have a headache or a back pain or a stomach upset or whatever it is. All you're bringing in is complete awareness to the body, to each part of the body, and reminding yourself that wherever I am, whether I'm in a local train or in the midst of traffic or at home having dinner, in that moment, there's nothing to defend and nothing to promote and nothing to fear. Because in that moment, we are alive and complete, and we have access to all parts of ourselves, and that's all we need. And in that moment of presence, everything becomes available. All aspects of our creativity, our choices, our freedom, our thought processes, our physical energy, all of that becomes available in that moment of presence. So that's cultivating presence. The invitation, of course, is to stay in that state that you brought about for yourselves. Why are we speaking about presence to close is the final answer to depression, to violence, to despair, to sadness is presence. Because end of the day, all of these states, all of these most emotional and mental ailments occur because of lack of presence, because we are stuck in a space that is no longer here and now. And the simplest cure is to be here and now, and in this moment, everything's good. The world exists, I exist, and I can do whatever I need to do in the world. So, yeah, it's the ultimate answer to depression, if we were to talk of that. I'm sure all of us have heard of Viktor Frankl.
Yes.
Right? I mean, his his idea of overcoming suffering and lending meaning to life was about stay present to this moment. This moment presents a possibility that the world might be good again, and therefore I need to live in this moment. That was the story of his life during the Second World War. Right, so that's the power of presence, and it is really the only place where we can really respond to reality. In all other states, we are reacting to reality. True response and an original and an innovative and a creative response can happen if you are completely there and then, and without any agenda of promoting anything from the past or from the future or defending anything that already exists or in fear of anything that might come. The only way of response is absolute presence. Yeah. And that's the presence is in a way the seat of the feminine in our psyche. That's where she resides in us. All right. So, thank you. Stay in presence.
Good.
And of course, that's a book I'd highly